The moment Penelope Edwards stepped off the stagecoach in Tucumcari, New Mexico Territory, in the scorching summer of 1878, she knew her life had reached its lowest point. Dust settled on her worn traveling dress, the same faded blue cotton she had owned for 3 years, patched so many times the original fabric barely showed through. She carried everything she owned in a single carpet bag that had belonged to her mother, and even that was nearly empty. "That is her." Mrs. Cartwright's voice carried across the dusty street, sharp enough to cut glass. "That is the girl my nephew has been corresponding with." Penelope held her head high despite the shame burning through her chest. She had been honest in her letters to Harold Cartwright, or at least she thought she had been. She told him she was 22 years old, that she had no family left after the fever took her parents in St. Louis, that she worked as a seamstress but barely made enough to survive. What she had not fully conveyed was just how poor she truly was, how desperate her circumstances had become. Harold stood beside his aunt, a thin man with a weak chin and eyes that would not quite meet hers. He looked nothing like his photograph, which must have been taken years ago and perhaps of someone else entirely. But Penelope was in no position to judge. She needed this marriage. Without it, she would be on the streets within a month. "Harold," Penelope said softly, stepping forward with her hand extended, "I am so pleased to finally meet you." He took her hand limply, his palm damp with sweat despite the dry heat. "Miss Edwards, you look different than I imagined." Mrs. Cartwright circled Penelope like a hawk examining prey. "What skills do you have, girl? Can you cook? Do you know how to manage a household? What is your dowry?" "I have no dowry, madam," Penelope admitted, her voice steady though her heart hammered. "But I am a hard worker. I can sew, I can read and write, I can learn whatever else is needed." "No dowry." Mrs. Cartwright's laugh was bitter. "No family connections, no property, no prospects. Harold, this is absurd. You cannot possibly marry this woman. She has nothing to bring to a marriage. Nothing at all." Harold's face reddened, but he did not defend Penelope. Instead, he looked at his boots and mumbled, "Aunt Eugenia, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "There is nothing to discuss," Mrs. Cartwright snapped. "I will not allow you to throw away your future on a penniless nobody. The engagement is off." Penelope felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had used her last dollars to pay for the stagecoach ticket. She had nowhere to go, no money to return to St. Louis, even if there was anything waiting for her there. The other passengers from the coach had already scattered to their destinations, leaving her alone on the street with her single bag and her shattered hopes. "I understand," Penelope said quietly, fighting to keep her voice from breaking. "If I may ask, is there a boarding house in town?" "Perhaps somewhere I might find work." Harold finally looked at her, guilt flickering across his features. "Miss Edwards, I am sorry. I thought, well, I had hoped. But Aunt Eugenia controls my inheritance and I cannot, that is, I must consider my position." "Of course," Penelope said. She would not cry in front of these people. She had survived worse than this. Somehow she would survive this too. Mrs. Cartwright had already turned away, gripping Harold's arm and steering him toward a fine carriage waiting nearby. Penelope stood alone in the dusty street, watching her future disappear in a cloud of dust and broken promises. "You need somewhere to stay." A deep voice spoke behind her. Penelope turned to find herself looking up at a tall man wearing dusty riding clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. As he stepped closer, she could see he was probably in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of whiskey. A silver badge was pinned to his vest. "I am not in a position to pay for lodging at present," Penelope said honestly, "but I hope to find work quickly." The man removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting. "Name is Quinton Vale. I am the deputy sheriff here in Tucumcari. I could not help but overhear what just happened." "That was a raw deal, Miss Penelope Edwards," she introduced herself. "And yes, it was unfortunate, but I will manage, I always do." Quinton studied her face for a long moment. "The boarding house on 3rd Street sometimes needs help. Mrs. Martinez, who runs it, is getting on in years. Might be she would trade room and board for work. I could walk you over there if you like." Hope flickered in Penelope's chest. "That would be very kind of you, Deputy Vale. Just Quinton, please." He picked up her carpet bag before she could protest. "This all you got?" "Yes." She would not apologize for her poverty, not anymore. "I travel light." Something that might have been respect crossed his face. "Nothing wrong with that. Makes you free to move where you need to go." They walked through the dusty streets of Tucumcari, and Quinton pointed out the important buildings. The general store, the church, the saloon, the jail where he worked. The town was small but bustling, full of cowboys, merchants, and families trying to carve out lives in the harsh New Mexico territory. "You said you can sew?" Quinton asked as they walked. "Yes, quite well actually. It was how I supported myself in St. Louis." "Mrs. Martinez is not the only one who might need help. The seamstress we had here, Miss Abernathy, just moved back east to care for her sick mother. Folks around here have been struggling without someone to do mending and alterations." Penelope's mind began turning with possibilities. "Do you think there would be enough work to support myself?" "Maybe, probably." Quinton glanced at her. "This is not St. Louis, Miss Edwards. Life out here is hard, but if you are willing to work, there are opportunities." "I am willing to work," Penelope assured him. "I am willing to do whatever it takes." The boarding house was a 2-story adobe structure with a shaded porch and flowers growing in clay pots. Mrs. Martinez turned out to be a round woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She listened to Quinton explain the situation, then looked Penelope up and down. "You are the girl who got jilted by Harold Cartwright?" Mrs. Martinez asked bluntly. "News travels fast," Penelope said. "Small town." Mrs. Martinez shrugged. "That Eugenia Cartwright is a viper. Harold never had a chance of standing up to her. You are better off without him." "I do not doubt that," Penelope agreed, "but I still need a place to stay and work to do." Mrs. Martinez nodded slowly. "I have a small room in the back. It is not much, just a bed and a washstand. You would help me with the cleaning, the cooking, the laundry. In exchange, you get the room and 2 meals a day. Any money you make from sewing or other work is yours to keep. Does that sound fair?" "More than fair," Penelope said, relief washing through her. "Thank you, Mrs. Martinez. You will not regret this. We shall see." But Mrs. Martinez smiled as she said it. "Come, I will show you the room. Quinton, thank you for bringing her." Quinton tipped his hat. "Welcome to Tucumcari, Miss Edwards. I hope it treats you better than St. Louis did." As he walked away, Penelope found herself watching him go, wondering about the quiet deputy who had shown kindness to a stranger with nothing to offer. Then Mrs. Martinez was leading her inside, and there was no more time for wondering about anything except the new life she would have to build from nothing. The room was indeed small, with bare adobe walls and a narrow bed covered in a faded quilt. But it was clean, and it was hers. Penelope set down her carpet bag and sat on the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of the day. She had traveled halfway across the country to marry a man who had rejected her the moment she arrived. She was alone in a strange town with no money and no prospects. And yet, somehow, she did not feel hopeless. Perhaps it was the dry, clear air of New Mexico. Perhaps it was Mrs. Martinez's unexpected kindness or Quinton Vale's quiet support. Whatever it was, Penelope felt something she had not felt in a long time: determination. She would not just survive in Tucumcari. She would thrive. That evening, Mrs. Martinez introduced Penelope to the other boarders. A school teacher named Miss Shaw, two ranch hands named Tom and Eddie, and an elderly prospector called Old Pete who mostly kept to himself. They ate dinner together at a long table, passing bowls of beans and fresh bread, and Penelope learned that Mrs. Martinez's husband had died 5 years ago, leaving her to run the boarding house alone. "It is too much for one person," Mrs. Martinez admitted over coffee after the meal. "But I could not afford to hire help. This arrangement, it will be good for both of us, I think." "I will work hard," Penelope promised. "You will see." The next morning, Penelope woke before dawn and began proving her worth. She helped Mrs. Martinez prepare breakfast, then cleaned the dining room and the upstairs hallway. After that, she washed bedsheets and hung them to dry in the hot sun. By midday, her arms ached and sweat soaked through her dress, but she felt more satisfied than she had in months. Mrs. Martinez watched her with approval. "You do not shy away from hard work. That is good, but you need to start building your sewing business too. Come, let us go see Mr. Patterson at the general store. He can help spread word that there is a new seamstress in town." Mr. Patterson turned out to be a friendly man with a thick mustache and a tendency to talk rapidly. He immediately saw the benefit of having a seamstress available again. "Miss Abernathy left 3 months ago," he explained. "Since then, people have been saving up their mending or trying to do it themselves. Most of them do a terrible job. I can put up a notice in the store if you like, and I can tell customers when they come in." "That would be wonderful," Penelope said. "I can do alterations, mending, make new garments from scratch if needed, whatever people require." "What are your rates?" Mr. Patterson asked. Penelope had thought about this carefully. She needed to charge enough to eventually save money, but not so much that people would try to do without. She named prices that were fair but not cheap, watching Mr. Patterson's reaction. He nodded. "That seems reasonable. I will send people your way. Mrs. Martinez, you are keeping her at the boarding house." "In exchange for work, yes," Mrs. Martinez confirmed. "If anyone asks, they can find her there." Word spread quickly through Tucumcari. By the end of the week, Penelope had her first customers: a ranch wife who needed her husband's shirts mended, a saloon girl who wanted a dress altered, and a merchant who needed his Sunday suit taken in. Penelope worked late into the nights by lamplight, her fingers moving quickly over the fabric. Each completed job meant a few coins added to the small jar she kept hidden under her bed. She saw Quinton occasionally around town, and he always tipped his hat and asked how she was settling in. There was something comforting about his presence, a quiet steadiness that made her feel safer in this still unfamiliar place. 2 weeks after her arrival, Penelope was hanging laundry in the yard behind the boarding house when she heard raised voices from the street. She recognized one of them as Mrs. Cartwright. "It is disgraceful," Mrs. Cartwright was saying loudly. "That woman coming here under false pretenses, trying to trap my nephew into marriage." Penelope's hand stilled on the wet sheet she was hanging. She told herself to ignore it, to go back inside, but her feet would not move. She was honest about her circumstances. Another voice responded, and Penelope realized with surprise that it was Quinton. "Your nephew knew she had no money. That was in her letters." "She is a schemer," Mrs. Cartwright insisted. "A gold digger looking for a man to support her lazy ways." "Funny thing about that," Quinton said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I have seen Miss Edwards working from dawn until after dark every day since she arrived. She helps Mrs. Martinez run the boarding house, and she has started building a sewing business. Does not seem very lazy to me." "How dare you speak to me that way? I will have you removed from your position." "You can try, madam. But I report to Sheriff Morgan, and he does not take kindly to people bullying newcomers to town, especially newcomers who are working hard and minding their own business." There was a long silence. Then Mrs. Cartwright said icily, "You will regret this, Deputy Vale." "I will take my chances, madam." Penelope heard footsteps retreating, then Quinton's boots on the gravel. She remained frozen by the clothesline, her heart pounding. No one had ever defended her like that before. Her parents had loved her, but they had been too sick to protect her in those final months. Since then, she had learned to rely only on herself. "You can come out now," Quinton called. "She is gone." Penelope stepped around the clothesline to find Quinton standing in the alley beside the boarding house, his hat in his hands. "You did not have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did." His whiskey-colored eyes met her steadily. What she was saying was not true and not fair. "You have done nothing wrong. I appreciate it, but I do not want you to make enemies on my account." Quinton's mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. "Eugenia Cartwright has been trying to run this town since her husband died. Someone needs to stand up to her now and then. Besides, I only told the truth. You are a hard worker, Penelope. Anyone with eyes can see that." It was the first time he had used her given name, and something warm unfurled in her chest at the sound of it. "Still," she said, "thank you. You are welcome." He settled his hat back on his head. "I should get back to my rounds. Will I see you at the church social this Sunday?" Penelope had heard about the monthly social but had not planned to attend. "I do not know if that is a good idea. After what happened with Harold, people might talk." "People will talk anyway," Quinton said practically. "You might as well enjoy yourself while they do it. Besides, Mrs. Martinez makes the best apple pie in the territory, and she always brings 3 to share." Despite herself, Penelope smiled. "That is a compelling argument." "I will take that as a yes." Quinton tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Penelope standing in the dusty yard with her heart beating just a little faster than it should. Sunday arrived bright and hot, and Penelope wore her only good dress, a simple green cotton that she had carefully mended and pressed. Mrs. Martinez had indeed made 3 apple pies, and they carried them to the church together, along with old Pete and the other boarders. The church lawn was filled with people talking, laughing, and sharing food. Children ran between the adults, playing games. A group of men were setting up tables while women laid out dishes. It was the kind of community gathering Penelope had not experienced since leaving St. Louis. She felt eyes on her as she helped Mrs. Martinez arrange the pies on the dessert table. People were curious about her, whispering behind their hands, but most of the looks were not unkind, just interested. "That is her," a young woman asked nearby. "The one Harold was supposed to marry." "Poor thing," her companion said. "Can you imagine coming all this way just to be rejected?" "Eugenia Cartwright is a dragon," the first woman said. "Harold never stood a chance against her." Penelope kept her head high and pretended not to hear. She was helping Mrs. Martinez cut the pies when Quinton appeared at her elbow. "Miss Edwards," he said formally, "would you do me the honor of getting a plate of food with me?" She looked up at him in surprise. He was dressed in clean clothes, his hair still damp from washing, and he smelled faintly of soap and leather. "I would like that," she said. They filled plates with fried chicken, potato salad, biscuits, and vegetables, then found a spot under a cottonwood tree slightly apart from the main crowd. As they ate, Quinton told her about Tucumcari, about how it had grown in recent years as more people moved west, about the challenges and rewards of keeping the peace. "Why did you become a deputy?" Penelope asked. Quinton was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "My father was a sheriff in Texas. He was killed trying to stop a bank robbery when I was 16. I saw how much his death hurt the community, how much people relied on him. I wanted to do what he did to help keep people safe. I am sorry about your father, Penelope said softly. It was a long time ago. My mother remarried a good man, a rancher. They are happy. I visit when I can. He looked at her. What about your family? You said you lost your parents to fever. Penelope nodded. 3 years ago, we were not wealthy, but we were comfortable. My father was a clerk. My mother took in sewing. When they died, I discovered they had debts I did not know about. Medical bills, mostly. I sold everything to pay what I could, then tried to support myself with sewing. But St. Louis was expensive, and there were so many seamstresses. I barely made enough to survive. So you answered Harold's advertisement for a wife, Quinton said. Yes, it seemed like the only option. She looked down at her plate. I knew it was not a love match, but I hoped we might build something good together. I should have known it was too good to be true. He is a fool, Quinton said bluntly. You would have made him a fine wife. Penelope felt heat rise in her cheeks. You barely know me. I know you are brave enough to travel halfway across the country alone. I know you work harder than anyone I have seen in a long time. I know you hold your head high even when people are gossiping about you. That tells me plenty. Before Penelope could respond, a group of children ran past, laughing and chasing a ball. One of them, a little girl of about 6, tripped and fell hard, scraping her knees on the rough ground. She immediately began to wail. Penelope set down her plate and hurried over, kneeling beside the crying child. Let me see, sweetheart. Oh, that looks like it hurts, does it not? The girl nodded, tears streaming down her face. Penelope pulled a clean handkerchief from her pocket and gently dabbed at the scraped knees. You are very brave. I can see you are trying so hard not to cry too much. What is your name? Sarah, the girl hiccuped. Well, Sarah, I think these knees will heal up just fine, but they need to be cleaned properly. Shall we find your mother? A woman rushed over, clearly Sarah's mother. Thank you so much. Sarah, how many times have I told you to be careful? She is all right, Penelope assured her. Just a scrape, but it should be washed and bandaged. I have supplies at the church, the woman said gratefully. You are Miss Edwards, are you not? The new seamstress. I am. I am Ruth Morrison. I have a whole basket of mending I have been meaning to bring you. My husband and sons are so hard on their clothes. She scooped up Sarah. Come by the house any time. We are at the Morrison Ranch, about 3 miles north of town. Anyone can give you directions. As Ruth carried Sarah away, Penelope returned to find Quinton watching her with an expression she could not quite read. What? She asked. You are good with children, he observed. I like them. Before my parents got sick, I used to help teach Sunday school. She settled back down under the tree. Why are you looking at me like that? I am just thinking that Mrs. Cartwright is wrong. You have plenty to bring to a marriage, just maybe not the things she thinks matter. Penelope's breath caught. The way Quinton was looking at her, steady and warm, made her pulse quicken. What things do you think matter? Kindness, Quinton said simply. Strength. The ability to work hard and not give up when things get difficult. Those seem more important than money or property to me. Not everyone thinks that way, Penelope said quietly. No, Quinton agreed. But some of us do. The rest of the afternoon passed in a pleasant blur. Penelope met more of the townspeople, collected several promises for sewing work, and found herself laughing more than she had in months. Quinton stayed near her the whole time, not possessively but protectively, his presence a quiet reassurance. As the sun began to set and people started gathering their things, Quinton walked Penelope and Mrs. Martinez back to the boarding house. Thank you for suggesting I come, Penelope told him. I am glad I did. So am I, Quinton tipped his hat. Good night, Penelope, Mrs. Martinez. Penelope watched him walk away down the dusty street, and Mrs. Martinez made a knowing sound beside her. What? Penelope asked. "That is a good man," Mrs. Martinez said. "He does not pay that kind of attention to just anyone." "We are just friends," Penelope protested. Hum. Mrs. Martinez headed inside, leaving Penelope standing on the porch, thinking about Quinton's words and the way he had looked at her. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Penelope worked hard, splitting her time between helping Mrs. Martinez and building her sewing business. Word spread that she was skilled and reliable, and soon she had more work than she could handle. The jar under her bed slowly filled with coins. Quinton stopped by the boarding house regularly, always with some excuse, checking on Mrs. Martinez's safety, asking if there had been any trouble bringing news from town. But his visits always seemed to coincide with times when Penelope might be taking a break from her work, and they always ended up talking. She learned that he was 26, that he had a sister married to a rancher in Colorado, that he loved to read but rarely had time for it. He learned that she had once dreamed of having her own dress shop, that she missed the music and theater of St. Louis, but loved the wide open spaces of New Mexico, that she had a talent for remembering details about people. "It helps with sewing," she explained one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch watching the sunset. "If I remember that Mrs. Morrison prefers higher necklines, and that Mr. Patterson is sensitive about his expanding waistline, I can make adjustments without them having to ask." "That is clever," Quinton said. "People appreciate being understood." "What about you?" Penelope asked. "What do you appreciate?" Quinton thought about it. "Honesty, courage, someone who says what they mean and means what they say." He looked at her. "You are honest, Penelope." "I appreciate that about you." "Even when my honesty is about difficult things," she asked. "Like how poor I am, how I came here hoping to marry a man I did not love just to survive." "Especially then," Quinton said firmly. "You did not pretend to be something you are not. You were just trying to survive, to make a life. There is no shame in that." Penelope felt something shift inside her, a wall she had built around her heart beginning to crack. "Quinton, can I ask you something? Anything? Why have you been so kind to me? From the very first day, when you had no reason to help a stranger." Quinton was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the darkening sky. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and serious. "That first day when I saw you standing in the street after Harold and his aunt drove away, you looked so alone, but you were not crying or falling apart. You were already thinking about what to do next, how to survive. I saw strength in you, Penelope. Real strength, the kind that matters. And I thought, here is someone worth knowing, someone worth helping if I could." "That is all?" Penelope asked softly. "That is how it started," Quinton admitted. "Now it is different." "How is it different?" Quinton turned to face her fully, and in the fading light his eyes were intense. "Now I help you because I cannot imagine not being part of your life. Now I come by because seeing you is the best part of my day. Now I think about you when I am supposed to be working, wonder what you are doing, if you are happy, if you ever think about me the way I think about you." Penelope's heart hammered in her chest. "Quinton, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted quickly. "I know you just got here, that you have been through a lot. I am not asking for anything, Penelope. I just wanted you to know. You deserve to know that someone sees how remarkable you are." "I do think about you," Penelope said, her voice barely above a whisper. "More than I probably should. You have been nothing but kind to me, but it is more than that. When I am with you, I feel safe. I feel seen. I feel like maybe I could be more than just someone struggling to survive." Quinton reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle. "You are already more than that, Penelope. You are strong and brave and kind. You work harder than anyone I know. You make people feel at ease. You bring light to places that need it. Those are the things that matter to you, Penelope asked, thinking of their conversation at the church social. Yes, Quinton said simply. Those are the things that matter. They sat there on the porch as the stars came out, hands linked, not saying much but not needing to. Penelope felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope for happiness. Hope for a future that might include more than just hard work and getting by. The sound of the door opening made them spring apart. Mrs. Martinez stuck her head out, a knowing smile on her face. Penelope, you have a visitor. Mrs. Brennan is here about altering her daughter's wedding dress. I will go, Quinton said, standing and settling his hat on his head. Good night, Penelope. Good night, Quinton. She watched him walk away into the darkness, her hand still warm from his touch. Mrs. Brennan's commission was important. Her daughter Emily was marrying a rancher's son in 6 weeks, and the dress had been her grandmother's, needing extensive alterations to fit and to update the style. It was the kind of work that could establish Penelope's reputation as more than just a mender of torn shirts. Penelope threw herself into the project, spending hours carefully taking apart the old lace and satin, preserving what could be saved and replacing what could not. She worked late into the nights, her eyes straining in the lamplight, but she did not mind. This was the kind of work she loved, creating something beautiful. Quinton continued to visit, and their relationship deepened in quiet ways. He brought her coffee when he saw her light burning late. She mended the tear in his vest without being asked. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. One afternoon, about 2 months after Penelope's arrival in Tucumcari, she was walking back from delivering some mending when she heard a commotion near the saloon. A crowd had gathered and she could hear angry voices. Concerned, she hurried over to find a young cowboy backing away from 3 larger men. The cowboy could not have been more than 18, and he looked terrified. I told you, I did not cheat, the boy was saying. I just had a lucky hand. You calling me a liar? One of the larger men growled. He was drunk, swaying on his feet, his hand hovering near the gun at his hip. The crowd had gone quiet, people backing away. Penelope looked around frantically for Quinton or Sheriff Morgan, but neither was in sight. Nobody is calling anyone a liar, Penelope said loudly, stepping forward before she could think better of it. But maybe we can settle this without violence. The drunk man turned to squint at her. This is not your business, lady. You are right, it is not, Penelope agreed, her heart pounding. But that boy looks young enough to be your son. Do you really want to hurt him over a card game? He cheated me. Did anyone else at the table see him cheat? Penelope asked the crowd. Several men shook their heads. So maybe he just had better cards this time. Maybe next time you will win. Is it worth shooting someone over a maybe? The drunk man wavered, confusion crossing his face. His friends moved forward to grab his arms. Come on, Jake, one of them said. She is right. It is not worth it. Let us go sleep this off. They hauled Jake away, still muttering. The young cowboy looked at Penelope with wide, grateful eyes. Thank you, madam. I really did not cheat. I would never. I believe you, Penelope said, but maybe you should be more careful about who you play cards with. Yes, madam, I will. The crowd dispersed, and Penelope was about to continue on her way when she felt a hand on her arm. She turned to find Quinton, his face pale. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? He demanded. Jake Miller is mean when he is drunk. He could have shot you. He could have shot that boy, Penelope countered. I could not just stand by and let that happen. That is my job, Penelope, not yours. You were not here, she pointed out. Someone had to do something. Quinton ran his hand through his hair in frustration. You are going to give me gray hairs, woman. I am sorry I worried you, Penelope said more gently, but I am fine. Everyone is fine. This time, Quinton took her arm more carefully. Come on, I am walking you back to the boarding house. They walked in silence for a moment before Quinton spoke again, his voice quieter. You scared me, Penelope. When I heard there was trouble, and then I saw you standing there with Jake Miller threatening to pull his gun, I thought, he stopped, swallowing hard. I thought I might lose you before I ever really had you. Penelope stopped walking, turning to face him. They were on a quiet side street out of sight of most of the town. You have me, Quinton. You have had me for a while now, I think. Have I? His eyes searched hers. Because sometimes I wonder if you are just being kind to the deputy who helped you when you needed it. Is that really what you think? Penelope asked. After all our conversations, all the time we have spent together, you think I am just being polite? I do not know what to think, Quinton admitted. You have been here 3 months, Penelope. You are building a good life. You do not need anyone to take care of you. Maybe you do not need me at all. Need and want are different things, Penelope said. She reached up to touch his face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw. I do not need you to take care of me, Quinton, but I want you in my life. I want your company and your conversation and your kindness. I want to hear about your day and tell you about mine. I want to sit on the porch with you and hold your hand. She stopped, suddenly shy. What do you want? Quinton asked, his voice rough. I want you to kiss me, Penelope whispered. Quinton's eyes darkened. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses. Are you sure? I am sure. He kissed her then, soft and sweet at first, then deeper as she responded. Penelope's hands gripped his shoulders, and she felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinton rested his forehead against hers. I am courting you, he said firmly. Officially. I am going to do this properly, Penelope. I am going to take you to dances and church socials and anywhere else you want to go. I am going to bring you flowers and walk you home and make sure everyone in this town knows you are mine. Yours? Penelope asked, but she was smiling. If you will have me, Quinton said. I know I am just a deputy. I do not have much to offer except my salary and a small house I have been saving for and the promise that I will spend every day trying to make you happy. Just a deputy, Penelope repeated. Quinton, you are the best man I have ever known. You stood up for me when no one else would. You saw value in me when I had nothing. You make me feel like I matter, like I am more than just my circumstances. You are more, Quinton said intensely. You are everything, Penelope. Everything that matters. Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. Mrs. Cartwright said I had nothing to bring to a marriage. Mrs. Cartwright is a fool, Quinton said. You bring kindness and strength and courage. You bring warmth and light and laughter. You bring yourself, Penelope, and that is everything. That is more than enough. It is more than I deserve. You deserve everything good, Penelope said fiercely. And if you want to court me properly, then yes. My answer is yes. Quinton kissed her again, and Penelope thought that this, right here, was what happiness felt like. Not security or wealth or social standing, but this. Being loved for who you truly were, for the things that really mattered. True to his word, Quinton courted her properly. He took her to the next town dance, where they stayed until midnight and her feet ached from dancing. He brought her wildflowers he picked on his rounds. He came to dinner at the boarding house and charmed Mrs. Martinez with his good manners and his genuine interest in her stories. The whole town knew within days that Deputy Vale was courting Miss Edwards. Most people were pleased, seeing it as a good match. A few, like Mrs. Cartwright, sniffed and made disparaging remarks, but Penelope found she did not care. She had Quinton, she had her work, she had friends and a home. She had everything that mattered. Emily Brennan's wedding dress was a triumph. When Penelope delivered it a week before the wedding, Mrs. Brennan cried and insisted Penelope attend the ceremony as a special guest. The wedding was beautiful, and Emily looked radiant in the transformed gown. Afterward, several women approached Penelope about making new dresses for them. "You have a real talent," Mrs. Morrison said. "Have you ever thought about opening your own shop?" "I have thought about it," Penelope admitted, "but I would need space and more supplies. Someday, perhaps." That evening, she mentioned the conversation to Quinton as they sat on the porch of the boarding house. He was quiet for a moment. "There is an empty storefront on Main Street," he said finally. "Old Mr. Chen used to have his laundry there before he retired. The space has been sitting empty for months. The owner might be willing to rent it cheap to the right person." "Quinton, I cannot afford to rent a shop," Penelope said, though her heart ached at the thought. "Not yet," Quinton agreed, "but maybe soon. You are saving money, are you not? And your business is growing. It is not impossible." Penelope looked at him, at this man who believed in her dreams as much as his own. "Will you show me the space tomorrow?" "I would be happy to." The storefront was perfect. It had large windows that let in good light, plenty of room for a work table and storage, and a small back room that could be used for fittings. The owner, Mr. Wallace, was indeed willing to negotiate on the rent. "If you can pay 3 months in advance," he said, "I will give you a reduced rate for the first year. I would rather have a good tenant who will take care of the place than let it sit empty." Penelope did the calculations in her head. If she kept working at her current pace, if she was careful with her expenses, she could have enough saved in 4 months, maybe 5 to be safe. "I will think about it," she told Mr. Wallace. But she was already thinking about how the space would look, where she would put her sewing machine when she could afford one, how she would arrange bolts of fabric and thread. Quinton saw the longing on her face. "You are going to do it, are not you?" "I am going to try," Penelope said. "If I work hard and save carefully, I think I can do it." "You can do anything you set your mind to," Quinton said with certainty. "I have seen it." That night, Penelope lay awake in her small room, thinking about the future. 6 months ago, she had been desperate and alone in St. Louis. 4 months ago, she had arrived in Tucumcari with nothing but a carpetbag and broken dreams. Now she had work she loved, friends who cared about her, a man who looked at her like she was precious, and a goal to work toward. She thought about Mrs. Cartwright's words, "You have nothing to bring to a marriage." At the time they had felt like a death sentence. Now they seemed absurd. She had so much to offer. Maybe not money or property or social connections, but things that mattered more: loyalty, determination, love. The months that followed were busy and happy. Penelope worked harder than ever, taking every commission she could manage without sacrificing quality. She learned to negotiate better prices for her services, to gently push back when customers tried to take advantage of her newness to town. Her jar of savings grew steadily. Quinton continued to court her, and Penelope fell more in love with him every day. She loved how he treated everyone with respect, from the wealthiest rancher to the poorest prospector. She loved how he read to Mrs. Martinez when her eyes were tired, how he helped old Pete fix a broken chair, how he always had time to listen when she talked about her dreams. In November, Sheriff Morgan announced he was retiring. The town council would need to appoint a new sheriff, and everyone assumed Quinton would get the position. He was well-liked, capable, and had proven himself over and over. But at the town council meeting, Mrs. Cartwright stood up with a proposal. Her nephew Harold should be appointed sheriff. He had, she claimed, extensive experience in law enforcement back east. This was news to everyone, including Harold, who looked deeply uncomfortable. "I appreciate Aunt Eugenia's confidence," Harold said weakly, "but I have no such experience. Deputy Vale is clearly the better choice." The council agreed, and Quinton was appointed sheriff with a modest increase in salary. As people congratulated him after the meeting, Penelope saw Mrs. Cartwright watching them with narrowed eyes. "You are making a mistake," Mrs. Cartwright said loudly. "That Edwards woman will drag you down, Quinton Vale. She is using you just like she tried to use my nephew." The room went quiet. Quinton stepped forward, his face hard. "Madam, you will not speak about Penelope that way. Not now, not ever. She has proven herself to be a valued member of this community. She works harder than most people I know. She has built a successful business from nothing, and she treats everyone with kindness and respect. If you cannot see her worth, that says more about you than it does about her." Mrs. Cartwright's face turned red. "Well, maybe you should," Quinton interrupted. "Maybe you should consider that there are more important things than money and social position. Maybe you should think about why your nephew is miserable under your control, and why no one in this town actually likes you despite your wealth. Penelope has more value in her little finger than you have in your whole bitter, grasping soul." There was a collective gasp. No one had ever spoken to Mrs. Cartwright like that. She looked like she might explode. "How dare you?" she sputtered. "I dare because it is true and because someone needed to say it," Quinton said calmly. "Now, if you will excuse me, I would like to celebrate with my friends and with the woman I love." He took Penelope's hand and led her outside, leaving Mrs. Cartwright standing alone in the shocked silence. Once they were outside, Penelope turned to him. "You said you love me." Quinton stopped, his eyes widening as he realized what he had said. Well, yes, I do. I love you, Penelope. I know we have only been courting a few months, and I was not planning to tell you like this in front of everyone, but I do. I love you." Penelope felt like her heart might burst from happiness. "I love you too, Quinton. I think I have loved you since you defended me to Mrs. Cartwright that first time, maybe even before that." Quinton pulled her into his arms right there on Main Street, not caring who saw. "Marry me, Penelope. I know you are saving for your shop and building your business, and we can wait as long as you need. But marry me, be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you how much you are loved and valued." "Yes," Penelope said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." Quinton kissed her soundly, and several passers-by cheered. When they finally broke apart, both grinning like fools, Mrs. Martinez was standing on the sidewalk with tears in her eyes. "About time," she said. "I have been waiting for this since the day he brought you to my door. Come, we must celebrate." The engagement was the talk of Tucumcari for days. Most people were thrilled, already planning what they would bring to the wedding. A few, led by Mrs. Cartwright, made snide remarks about gold diggers and fortune hunters. But their voices were drowned out by the genuine happiness of the majority. Penelope and Quinton decided to wait until spring to marry, giving Penelope time to save enough money not just for the shop, but to contribute to their household. Quinton argued that it was not necessary, that his salary as sheriff was enough for both of them, but Penelope insisted. "I want to be a partner, not a burden," she explained. "I want to bring something to our marriage beyond just myself." "You bring everything that matters," Quinton reminded her. "But I understand. If it is important to you, we will wait." In January, Penelope finally had enough saved to rent the storefront. Mr. Wallace was delighted to have a tenant at last, and he even helped her move her supplies and set up her work area. Within a week, she had transformed the empty space into a proper seamstress shop, with fabric samples displayed in the window and a painted sign reading "Edwards Dressmaking and Alterations." The shop was an immediate success. Penelope no longer had to work from the boarding house. though she still helped Mrs. Martinez in the mornings before opening the shop. She hired a young girl named Annie, whose family had fallen on hard times, to help with basic sewing tasks. It was satisfying to provide work for someone else, to know she was helping another person survive and maybe thrive. Quinton stopped by the shop every day, usually with some excuse, checking on her safety, bringing her lunch, asking her opinion on some town matter. But they both knew he just wanted to see her, to steal a few moments together in their busy days. As spring approached, wedding plans began in earnest. Penelope designed her own dress, a simple but elegant creation in cream-colored silk that she sewed in the evenings after the shop closed. Mrs. Martinez and several other women helped her prepare for the wedding, offering advice and assistance. Harold Cartwright surprised everyone by calling on Penelope at her shop one afternoon in March. "Miss Edwards," he said nervously, "might I have a moment of your time?" Penelope set down the dress she was hemming. "Of course, Mr. Cartwright. How can I help you?" Harold twisted his hat in his hands. "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you when you arrived, for letting my aunt dictate my actions, for being too much of a coward to stand up for what was right." Penelope studied him. He looked older than his 28 years, worn down by his aunt's domination. "I appreciate the apology, Harold, but what has brought this on?" "I have been watching you," Harold said, then flushed. "Not in a strange way, I just mean, I have seen how hard you have worked, how you built a life here from nothing, how you are respected and liked by everyone in town. And I realized that if I had married you, if I had stood up to Aunt Eugenia, my life might have been very different." "You cannot change the past," Penelope said gently, "but you can change the future. You are your own man, Harold. You do not have to let your aunt control your life forever." "She controls my inheritance," Harold said bitterly. "There are things more valuable than money," Penelope said. "I know that is easy for me to say now, when I have my shop and my business. But I also know what it is like to have nothing. And I can tell you that being poor and free is better than being wealthy and trapped." Harold considered this. "I am thinking of leaving Tucumcari. Going to California, maybe, starting over where Aunt Eugenia cannot reach me." "I think that sounds like a wonderful idea," Penelope said warmly. "I wish you all the best, Harold. And I wish you happiness with Sheriff Vale. He is a good man, better than I was." Harold settled his hat on his head. "Thank you for listening, Miss Edwards, and for not hating me." "Life is too short for hate," Penelope said. "Good luck, Harold. I hope you find what you are looking for." After he left, Penelope thought about the strange turns life could take. If Harold had married her, she would never have fallen in love with Quinton. She would never have opened her shop or made friends like Mrs. Martinez. Sometimes the worst things that happen to you led to the best things in your life. The wedding took place on a beautiful Saturday in April. The church was packed with townspeople, all dressed in their finest. Penelope wore the cream silk dress she had made, with wildflowers in her hair and her mother's pearl earrings, the only things of her mother's she had been able to keep. Mrs. Martinez walked her down the aisle since Penelope had no family left to do it. Quinton stood at the altar in a new suit, his eyes shining as he watched her approach. She had never seen him look so happy. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When it came time for the vows, Quinton took both her hands in his. "Penelope," he said, his voice clear and strong, "when you arrived in Tucumcari, people said you had nothing to bring to a marriage, but I have always known the truth. You bring everything that matters. You bring courage and kindness, strength and grace, honesty and love. You bring your whole beautiful self, and that is more than I ever dreamed of having. I promise to love you, to honor you, to stand beside you in good times and bad, for all the days of my life." Penelope blinked back happy tears. "Quinton, you saw value in me when I had nothing. You defended me when no one else would. You believed in my dreams and helped me achieve them. You taught me that love is not about what you can get from someone, but about what you can give. I promise to love you with everything I have, to support your dreams as you have supported mine, to be your partner in all things, for as long as we both shall live." When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Quinton kissed her thoroughly, and the church erupted in cheers and applause. The reception was held on the church lawn, with tables groaning under the weight of food everyone had brought to share. There was music and dancing, and Penelope danced with Quinton until her feet ached, then danced some more, even Mrs. Cartwright attended, though she stood apart from the celebration, her face pinched with disapproval. Penelope almost felt sorry for her. The old woman was so focused on money and status that she could not see what really mattered. She would probably die wealthy and alone, while Penelope and Quinton would build a life filled with love and purpose. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Quinton led Penelope away from the crowd. They walked to the small house he had been saving for, the one that was now theirs together. It was a simple adobe structure with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a sitting room, but Quinton had spent weeks making it perfect for her. There were curtains on the windows, rugs on the floors, and wildflowers in a vase on the kitchen table. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vale," Quinton said, lifting her over the threshold. "Mrs. Vale," Penelope repeated, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that. So do I." Quinton set her down gently, then pulled her close. "I love you, Penelope. I will never stop being grateful that Harold Cartwright was fool enough to let you go." "I am grateful too," Penelope admitted. "If he had married me, I would never have found you. I would never have learned that I could build a life on my own strength. I would never have been truly happy." They stood in their new home, holding each other close, and Penelope thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had traveled west to marry a stranger, hoping for security. Instead, she had found something far better: love, purpose, and the knowledge that she was enough just as she was. The first year of marriage was full of joy and hard work. Penelope continued to run her shop, which grew more successful each month. She hired 2 more assistants and began making dresses for women as far away as Santa Fe. Quinton excelled as sheriff, keeping the peace in Tucumcari and earning respect throughout the territory. They were partners in every sense of the word. Quinton helped Penelope with her accounting in the evenings. Penelope mended his uniforms and listened to his concerns about difficult cases. They made decisions together, shared their dreams and fears, supported each other through challenges, and celebrated each other's victories. In the spring of their 2nd year of marriage, Penelope discovered she was expecting a child. Quinton was overjoyed, immediately becoming protective and insisting she should close the shop and rest. "I am pregnant, not fragile," Penelope laughed. "Women have been having babies and continuing to work since the beginning of time." But she did agree to take on less work and to let her assistants handle more of the basic tasks. Annie had developed into a skilled seamstress in her own right and was perfectly capable of managing the shop for a few hours each day. Their son was born in November, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined expression. They named him Thomas, after Quinton's father. Holding her son for the first time, Penelope marveled at how much her life had changed. 3 years ago, she had been alone and desperate. Now she had a husband she adored, a business she had built with her own hands, friends who felt like family, and a perfect baby son. She had everything that mattered. Mrs. Martinez came to help in those first overwhelming weeks, bringing food and advice and much-needed rest for the new parents. "You are doing wonderfully," she assured Penelope. "Thomas is a lucky boy to have you for a mother." "I am the lucky one," Penelope said, watching Quinton walk the baby around the room, singing softly. "I have all of this because I was brave enough to start over." As Thomas grew, Penelope gradually returned to work at the shop, bringing the baby with her. Customers loved seeing him, and Annie and the other assistants took turns entertaining him while Penelope sewed. It was not always easy, balancing motherhood and business and marriage, but it was deeply satisfying. Quinton was a devoted father, taking Thomas on his rounds when the baby was fussy, teaching him to ride almost before he could walk, reading to him every night. Watching them together made Penelope's heart full to bursting. When Thomas was 2, Harold Cartwright sent a letter from San Francisco. He had started a successful importing business and was engaged to be married to a woman he loved. Mrs. Cartwright had died the previous year, leaving her fortune to a distant cousin rather than Harold, but he did not seem to mind. "I am happier now than I ever was living under her thumb," he wrote. "Thank you for encouraging me to choose freedom over money. It was the best decision I ever made. I hope you and Sheriff Vale are well. I think of you sometimes and am glad things worked out as they did." Penelope showed the letter to Quinton that evening as they sat on their porch watching Thomas play in the yard. "I am glad he found happiness," Quinton said, "but I am more glad you found yours, found ours." "Do you ever regret it?" Penelope asked. "Marrying a woman with nothing?" "You could have chosen someone with money or connections." Quinton pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You had everything, Penelope. You just did not realize it yet, and neither did most other people. But I saw it from the beginning. You are the strongest, bravest, most capable woman I have ever known. You built a life from nothing. You face every challenge with grace. You love with your whole heart. How could I possibly regret marrying you?" "I love you," Penelope said softly. "I love you too, always will." Over the years that followed, their family grew. A daughter named Sarah arrived when Thomas was 4, followed 2 years later by another son they named Daniel. The house that had seemed so spacious with just the two of them became full of noise and laughter and love. Penelope's shop thrived, becoming one of the most successful businesses in Tucumcari. She employed 6 seamstresses and took commissions from all over the territory. She was known for her skill, her fair prices, and her willingness to work with customers who were struggling financially. She never forgot what it was like to be poor. Quinton served as sheriff for 15 years before being elected mayor of Tucumcari. He was respected and loved by the community, known for his fairness and his dedication to making the town a better place for everyone. Annie, Penelope's first assistant, eventually opened her own shop in a nearby town, with Penelope's help and blessing. Mrs. Martinez lived to see all 3 of Penelope and Quinton's children grow up, and when she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep at age 78, she left the boarding house to Penelope in her will. "You were like a daughter to me," Mrs. Martinez had told Penelope shortly before her death. "You came to me with nothing, and you became everything. I am so proud of you." Penelope wept at the funeral, grieving for the woman who had taken a chance on a desperate stranger all those years ago. She decided to keep the boarding house running, hiring a manager to oversee it but maintaining Mrs. Martinez's policy of helping those who needed it. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Quinton took Penelope back to the church where they had married. They renewed their vows in front of their 3 children, now teenagers, and a crowd of friends who had watched their love story unfold over the years. "20 years ago," Quinton said, holding Penelope's hands just as he had on their wedding day, "people said you had nothing to bring to a marriage. But every single day of these past 20 years you have proven them wrong. You brought courage when I was afraid. You brought strength when I was weak. You brought joy when times were hard. You brought love that never wavered, even when things got difficult. You brought yourself, Penelope, and that was always more than enough. It was everything. Penelope, now 42 years old but still beautiful in Quinton's eyes, smiled through her tears. And you, Quinton Vale, have spent 20 years showing me what real love looks like. Not love based on what someone owns or what they can provide, but love based on who they are. You taught me that I was valuable just as I was. You believed in me when I barely believed in myself. You have been my partner, my best friend, my greatest supporter. I would choose you 1,000 times over. They kissed to thunderous applause, and their children groaned good-naturedly about their parents being embarrassing. But Penelope could see the happiness in their eyes, the security of knowing they came from a family built on love and respect. That night, after the celebration had ended and the children were asleep, Penelope and Quinton sat on their porch watching the stars, just as they had done countless times over the years. "You remember the day you arrived in Tucumcari?" Quinton asked. "I will never forget it," Penelope said. "I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing and was nothing." "You were wrong," Quinton said firmly. "You always had everything that mattered. I just helped you see it." "We helped each other," Penelope corrected. "That is what partners do." She thought about that frightened girl stepping off the stagecoach with one carpetbag and a broken heart. She thought about Mrs. Cartwright's cruel words and Harold's weakness. She thought about the long journey that had led her to this moment. Sitting beside the man she loved, in a home they had built together, with 3 wonderful children sleeping safely inside. People had said she had nothing to bring to a marriage. They had been wrong. She had brought everything, her determination, her kindness, her ability to work hard and never give up. She had brought her whole self, and it had been enough. More than enough. "What are you thinking about?" Quinton asked, squeezing her hand. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Penelope said. "How blessed, how grateful." "So am I," Quinton said. "Every single day." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly across the New Mexico sky, 2 people who had found each other when they needed it most and had built a life based on the things that truly mattered. Not money or status or social position, but love and respect and partnership. Years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all lives do. Thomas grew up to become a lawyer, defending people who could not afford proper representation. Sarah became a teacher, educating the children of Tucumcari with patience and creativity. Daniel followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a deputy and eventually sheriff when Quinton retired from politics. Penelope continued to run her shop well into her 60s, finally passing it on to one of her most talented employees, when her hands grew too stiff with arthritis to sew as precisely as she wanted. She spent her retirement helping with her grandchildren, volunteering at the church, and working with other women to establish better services for those struggling with poverty. Quinton remained active in community affairs, serving on various boards and committees, always working to make Tucumcari a place where everyone had opportunities to thrive regardless of their circumstances. On their 40th anniversary, surrounded by their children, their grandchildren, and friends old and new, Penelope reflected on the incredible journey her life had taken. "If someone had told me 40 years ago that the worst day of my life would lead to the best life I could imagine, I would not have believed them," she said to the gathered crowd. "But it is true. Getting rejected by Harold Cartwright was the best thing that ever happened to me because it led me to Quinton. It forced me to build my own life instead of depending on someone else. It taught me that I was stronger than I knew." "And it brought you to us," her daughter Sarah said, hugging her. "Yes," Penelope agreed. It brought me to all of you, and I would not change a single moment of it. Quinton, now 66 years old with silver in his hair but still strong and steady, raised his glass. To my wife, who came to Tucumcari with nothing but herself and built an empire of love. You are, and always have been, everything that matters. To Penelope, the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. As Penelope looked around at the life she had built, at the family and friends who surrounded her, she felt nothing but gratitude. She had started with nothing by society's standards. No money, no family, no prospects. But she had always had the things that truly mattered: courage, determination, kindness, and the ability to love and be loved. Mrs. Cartwright had been wrong. Penelope had everything to bring to a marriage, to a life. And Quinton had seen it from the very beginning. That night, as they prepared for bed in the house they had shared for 4 decades, Quinton helped Penelope with the buttons on her dress that her stiff fingers struggled with. "Still taking care of me," Penelope said fondly. "Always," Quinton promised, "until my last breath." "And I will take care of you," Penelope said. "That is what we do. That is what we have always done." They climbed into bed, and Quinton pulled Penelope close, her head resting on his chest as it had for 40 years. "You know what I am most proud of?" Penelope asked quietly. "What is that?" "Not the shop, though I loved it. Not the money we made or the house we built. I am most proud that we created a family based on love and respect, that our children grew up knowing they were valued for who they were, not what they had, that we showed them what a real partnership looks like." "We did do that," Quinton agreed. "They are all good people, our children. Kind and strong, like their mother. And brave and honorable, like their father," Penelope added. They fell asleep like that, holding each other close, 2 people who had found love when they least expected it and had built a life that proved what really mattered. The years continued to be kind to them. They celebrated 50 years of marriage surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. Penelope lived to see her great-granddaughter named after her, a tiny baby with serious eyes and a determined expression. "She looks like you," Quinton said, holding the baby carefully. "God help her then," Penelope laughed. "She will have a stubborn streak a mile wide." "Nothing wrong with stubborn," Quinton said. "Stubborn got you through hard times. Stubborn built a successful business. Stubborn made you the woman I fell in love with." Penelope was 73 years old now, her hair completely white, her face lined with age. But when Quinton looked at her, he still saw the brave young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach with nothing but hope and determination. They spent their final years in quiet contentment, tending their garden, playing with their great-grandchildren, and enjoying each other's company. They had been together for over 50 years, and their love had only deepened with time. When Penelope passed away peacefully in her sleep at age 76, Quinton held her hand and whispered all the things he had told her 1,000 times before. How much he loved her, how grateful he was for every moment they had shared, how she had always been everything that mattered. The entire town mourned her passing. The funeral was the largest Tucumcari had ever seen, with people coming from all over the territory to pay their respects. Person after person stood up to share stories of Penelope's kindness, her generosity, her strength, her impact on their lives. "She gave me my first job when my family had nothing," Annie said, now an old woman herself. "She taught me not just how to sew, but how to believe in myself. She changed my life. She made my wedding dress when we could barely afford it," another woman said. "And she never made me feel ashamed of being poor. She understood. She fought for better schools, better services for the poor, better opportunities for women," Sarah said, her voice thick with tears. "She never forgot where she came from, and she used her success to help others." Thomas spoke last. My mother taught us that what matters is not what you have, but who you are. She proved every single day that a person with nothing but determination and love can build something extraordinary. She was the strongest person I ever knew." Quinton listened to all of it, his heart breaking and full at the same time. They had had 53 beautiful years together. It was not enough, could never be enough, but it was also more than many people ever got. He lived for 3 more years after Penelope's death, cared for by his children but never quite the same without his beloved wife. He spent those years making sure everyone knew Penelope's story, writing it down so it would not be forgotten. When he finally joined her, passing away quietly one spring morning, his family found a letter he had written to be read at his funeral. "I want to tell you about the day I met my wife," the letter began. "She had just been rejected by a weak man too afraid to stand up to his aunt. She had nothing, no money, no family, no prospects. Most people looked at her and saw a poor woman to be pitied or dismissed, but I looked at her and saw courage. I saw strength. I saw everything that mattered. Penelope taught me that value is not measured in dollars or property or social standing. It is measured in how we treat others, how we face adversity, how we love. She came to Tucumcari with nothing, and she left it richer than anyone I ever knew, rich in the things that cannot be counted or sold: love, family, friendship, respect. When we married, people said she had nothing to bring to our union, but she brought everything. She brought joy to my every day. She brought wisdom to my decisions. She brought love to my life. She brought herself, and that was always, always more than enough. If there is anything I want people to remember from my life, it is this: the things that matter cannot be bought or sold. They can only be given freely, from one heart to another. Penelope understood this from the beginning. It took me a little longer to see it, but once I did, my whole life changed. Love each other. Value each other for who you are, not what you have. Build lives based on what matters. That is the legacy Penelope and I tried to leave. I hope we succeeded. All my love to all of you. Until we meet again. Quinton Vale." There was not a dry eye in the church when the letter was finished. And afterward, as people gathered to share memories and comfort each other, they all agreed that Quinton and Penelope Vale had indeed succeeded in leaving a legacy that mattered. Their children and grandchildren continued to tell their story, passing it down through the generations. The tale of a woman who came west with nothing and a man who saw her true value. A love story that proved what really mattered in life. And in Tucumcari, New Mexico, for many years after, when someone was going through hard times or feeling worthless or wondering if they would ever be enough, people would say, "Remember Penelope Edwards. Remember that she had nothing and became everything. Remember that she brought everything that mattered." And somehow, that story gave people hope, gave them strength to keep going, reminded them that their worth was not determined by their circumstances, but by who they chose to be. The story of Penelope and Quinton Vale became a legend in Tucumcari, a reminder that love and courage and determination could overcome anything. That sometimes the worst things that happened to you led to the best things in your life, that you always had value, even when others could not see it. They had built a life together based on what truly mattered. And that life, that love, that legacy continued long after they were gone, inspiring others to see value where others saw nothing, to choose love over money, to believe that they, too, could bring everything that mattered to their lives and relationships. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the generations. The story of a cowboy who saw what others missed and a woman who proved them all wrong. The story of a love that changed 2 lives and inspired countless others. The story of everything that matters.